Welcome back, everybody. Spring Games 2024. I went for a walk here today, tried to find some indication that spring has sprung, some flowers, a little bit of greenery in the ground. Couldn't find it here. Got Leo out in the backyard, saw some buds in the tree, but that was as good as it got. Now in the virtual world, you can enjoy spring to your heart's content. So I got 5 games coming up. Of course, I'm mixing in a little bit of gardening, some simulation as well. You have to have some of those on your spring list. But really with me, what I associate more with spring as opposed to summer is nature and nurturing things, nursing that plant life like I talked about, not so much the heat and the blazing sun. I'm gonna reserve those for next season. So I got 5 games, like I said, hopefully you enjoy them. Let's get into it. Before I get to the 5 good games, I gotta talk about one that unfortunately does not make the cut. I played it, I thought it was a decent spring game, but it's just not a good game as far as the gameplay goes. And that is Turnip Boy Commits Tax Evasion. Cannot recommend it. What you have is a diluted 2D Zelda-style game, but it just falls flat on the combat, the story progression, basically everything except for its humor. That's the only thing that has going for it, and even that sometimes wears thin. You can tell by the title, it's not a game that takes itself too seriously. But some of the jokes where it's just, okay, I've kind of had enough, were with the self-aware fruits and vegetables. Or some of the constant references to pop culture and to memes. I mean, I guess if you like memes and you like meme games, go ahead and play it. It's only 3 hours long. There were some quests that were pretty funny. There's one little sub-story that was done for a streamer, and I enjoyed the writing there. I just didn't enjoy it all throughout the game. Now, the progression, after the combat, this is the worst thing in the game. It's like a series of stitched together fetch quests. You talk to an NPC and they tell you to go here. There's not that much to do in that area, so you're quickly on your way back. The NPC tells you to go talk to somebody else. You do that. You get an item. You give it to the next NPC. And so on and so forth, right up until the end of the game. So 3 hours somehow took me many nights to actually get through, because it was not engrossing. It was not too engaging. And then the combat, the hack and slash aspect of it, they needed something more. And I'm going to get back to that in a moment. The dungeons themselves and some of the puzzle solving mechanics, those were good. You have an ability in the first dungeon, kind of like Bomberman, where you approach a bomb flower and you can kick it. That's really fun to mess around with. You're breaking walls with these rolling bombs. When you finally beat the game, you unlock this sort of endless mode. You're on a train, and every car in the train has a map or a little level with enemies. Kind of like Binding of Isaac, how every screen has a series of enemies, and you combat them. That's what this endless mode has. And when you clear the car, you get to this screen where you can pick an item to upgrade your character, to get some combat enhancement. None of that is present in the main game. None of that is present in the main story. So it kind of feels like a tech demo. It's only 3 hours long. The best parts of the combat are reserved for the post-game. It's a little bit of a mess, but if you already have it, like I said, you can whip it off in one night. I physically couldn't. Now let's get into the 5 good games. And the way that I've ordered these games is not necessarily worst to best, not necessarily least spring-like to most spring-like. I'm starting out with a game that actually has a lot of similarities with Turnip Boy, but it's the better version of these 2 games. And that is Garden Story. Garden Story is a game that in this short amount of time, I'm not going to be able to detail every single mechanic or component or gameplay element. There's too much going on. But at its core, if I had to distill it, it is another Zelda-like adventure game. You are Concord, a grape who wakes up in the grove kind of as the chosen one. And the grove is a world that is full of anthropomorphic fruits and vegetables once again. But it is better than Turnip Boy, I promise you. There are 4 different towns that you will be exploring and roaming around in the overworld. All of them are based on a different season. You wake up in Springtown, hence the inclusion in this video. And Springtown was my main hub as I played the game. I found myself going back to it the most. Also on the map, it is the central town. What you are doing in these towns and what are you doing on your adventure? You are amassing different weapons and equipment. You are helping people on their journeys. You're interacting with all these different NPCs and doing a bunch of side quests. There are gameplay elements from Animal Crossing where there's a day and night cycle. And upon waking up every single day, the cycle repeats, and the bulletin board that is available in every single town, it repopulates 3 different daily quests, or up to 3. When you do these different quests, whether they are hammering fence posts around the town, collecting items and depositing them, you are going to gain a reputation score. Your reputation score unlocks different things in the town. Different things in the town means you can unlock your or upgrade your weapons and items. There are so many intricate little things that are interconnected really nicely. But then there are some other elements that aren't necessarily fleshed out enough, and that's where this game is really a 7 out of 10 instead of a masterpiece. It's a lot of fun. It's got a lot going for it. The different weapons with the different weapon types are fun to use. How you use a slashing weapon against certain enemies, a blunt weapon for more damage to break something on the overworld, how you are unlocking these different gems and getting these different items to bolster your stats, equipping different things to your character so that you can have these trade-offs. I want more movement speed, but at the cost of health. I want more health, but at the cost of whatever else it is. Nothing is ever too much of a handicap. So there's a lot of fun. There's a lot of stuff to explore. Some of the gameplay loop, again, I don't like using that term, but some of the repetitive gameplay that you do day after day, whether it's to get resources for crafting or what have you, it can get a little tedious. So freshening it up by having different things to upgrade, having different enemies to engage with, having different side quests, it helps balance the game out. Again, 7 out of 10, I think, is a very fair score for this game. You might think it's better. You might not fall in love with the game. You might not enjoy it. It was a 10-hour adventure for me, 15 hours after doing all the achievements and beating it 100%. I highly encourage you to check out this game when it's on sale. At least it deserves more people looking at it. Next up, Okami HD. This is a game that I wanted to play for a really long time. My friends got started with it in high school, and I took my sweet time to finally get around to it for this video. It was a long game, a 30-hour adventure. I would say it was much too long, but everyone's got a different way of breaking this game down. What I'm going to say is get ready for a long story, very much one of those ancient epics. You are Amaterasu. You are the sun god incarnated as this wolf. And as you go around the world, you're going to be defeating evil at every corner. You're going to be slaying monsters. You're going to be helping out the different townsfolk, restoring the world back to a place of peace and prosperity. Because darkness is corrupting things, and the way that that ties in with the different mechanics is really interesting and fun to watch. You see a lot of trees that are corrupted, and so they can't bloom. You see a lot of rivers that are tainted. If you enter them, they're poisonous, so you have to cleanse them and purge the darkness. I like a lot of the mechanics, I like a lot of the different elements of the game, but overall, it's a game with very many high peaks and very many low valleys. And rather than having a nice, consistent game all throughout, I was very much so going up and coming down, and going up and coming down. A lot of you have seen gameplay footage from this title before. You've seen the paintbrush being used, where if you do a horizontal slash on the screen, it is essentially a sword slash, and you can use that to damage enemies, or you can use it to clear some overgrowth on the map. Maybe that unlocks a new area for you to explore. Not every paintbrush ability is created equally. What I would have liked more of is actually the first one that you get. Let's say, for example, you have two ends of a bridge. If you take this first paintbrush ability and you draw in between the two ends, you can restore the bridge back to its original shape. You can then cross the bridge. It's a great puzzle mechanic, and there were not enough of those applications in the game. So a lot of your time in the overworld is spent running and sprinting and jumping. Sometimes it's a janky platforming, and sometimes it's assisted with other paintbrush abilities. But I just would have liked more creativity with the puzzles, I suppose. Some of the puzzles that are in the game, they're more like brain teasers, and they don't actually utilize your paintbrushes as much. One thing I'll complain about the visuals is there is a visual filter laid on top that adds a bit of blackness to everything. This like darker saturation, this opposite of things being washed out, where instead of the grasses being a really vibrant green, they've been painted over almost with a little too much shadow. Instead of the pink really popping off screen like being a bubblegum color, it's got a bit of a gray tone to it. So that's a minor complaint. I do think it's a very beautiful game, but it's not as popping visually as it could be. And then last, one more thing that I will say, and this relates back to my first point with the game being fairly inconsistent, is at least it ends on a high point. And the whole time I'm playing this game, I was torn between including it and not including it. Aside from investing 30 hours into the game, I think that the way the story wrapped up, the way that the characters have a decent ending and what you get to see of the world, and honestly, some of the gameplay mechanics, they are really fun, and you are only going to experience them if you play Okami. There's enough reasons why the game could be included. So, Okami HD, it was definitely a mixed bag. I wish it could have been a shorter game. I wish it could have been a little more compact. I wish it even could have done a little bit more differently with the paintbrushes, but still, I'm happy to have played it. This next game is probably my favorite of the 5, and that is Pikmin. Now, I've got Pikmin number 1 here because I have not played or beaten the other later titles. I've heard some complaints about Pikmin 1. Some people have found it a little too difficult. Some people can't go back to it because of the time mechanics where you only have 30 days to collect all of your ship parts. Look, when I was a kid, I also failed my first time. I could not collect every single part when I beat the game or whatever it was. All I know is that I had to restart the game, and I followed the guide to a T, and I ended up getting 100%. So if I could do that when I was 11 or 12 years old, I'm sure that you, as an adult, can go back to Pikmin 1, and you can have a really good time with the game. Maybe you need a guide, that's okay. The world of Pikmin and the story of Pikmin, you are Olimar, and as you're going through space, your ship breaks into 30 different parts. You crash land on this new unknown planet. You discover this new species of critter, this creature, Pikmin, and the Pikmin are going to enable you to collect all of your parts, put your ship back together again. The micromanaging aspects and the puzzle aspects, using your red Pikmin to go through fire, your blue Pikmin to go through water, your yellow Pikmin to carry explosives, that is so much fun for me. The macro-managing aspect, the strategy elements of the game. How do you plan your day and optimize it so that you can get as many parts as possible? What routes do you take to avoid certain enemies or to do boss fights on different times of day? There's so much that goes into it. It is so much fun. If Pikmin 1 is not the game that you want to play, if you have another game in the series that you've been meaning to get to, go ahead and play that this year. I just wanted to get Pikmin on this list. And it really does meet the spring criteria really nicely because your Pikmin especially, they start as these little sprouts, these little leaves, and then they get these buds, and then the buds eventually open up into flowers. And a lot of the environments that you'll be exploring, they're not so saturated in summery vibes, but just really nice, lush, open areas. So I can't say enough good things about the game. It's a game that I go back to every few years, even if it's just to record footage for these videos, and every time I do, I have such a good time with it. So, Pikmin, my favorite game on the list, but not the last. Unless you have been watching this channel for a long time, you've probably not seen this next game, Equilinox. This is one that I talked about in one of my underrated games videos, and it's a simulation game that I just found myself getting hooked on. I think it's a relatively short game. It took me about 8 hours to beat it and to achieve every single completion task that's in the game. It may take you longer, it may take you less time. It's a game that maybe you'll want to take your time with and not use any external guides and resources, and you'll just enjoy watching the world and experimenting and seeing what you can come up with. Or it might be a little frustrating, it might be a little cryptic, and you will need to use some external help, some third-party help. The way the game works is it is an ecosystem simulator. You start off very simply, growing some grasses, populating an area with a bunch of grass and some sheep, maybe some chickens and some wheat, and you're just trying to make that first basic ecosystem. And then what you're going to be doing is managing the genetics of the different species. So maybe you're going to go to one of your flowers and you're going to buy an upgrade so you can make a red flower pink. And if you crossbreed the pink flowers, or if you manage to grow a pink flower that is also larger, it unlocks something else, a different species of plant. With the trees, when I was doing some recordings for this game, I had my oak tree, I believe, and when I was tweaking some of the variables with the oak tree, I was eventually able to unlock an apple tree. Having the apple tree meant I could have an ecosystem with more fruit. Having an ecosystem with more fruit meant I was able to introduce more animal life. So it's a game that you could really just find yourself getting lost in. The graphics are always pretty. They're nice to look at. Everything's very soothing, very chill about the game. It's got a good soundtrack. It's one of those little hidden gems. It's one of those sleeper titles that's not going to blow anybody away. But for 5, 10, or maybe 15 hours, it's one that you can find yourself having a lot of fun with, managing your own world, managing what systems there are, putting different combinations of plants and animals together, seeing how they exist. Can they coexist, or will one eat the other and you'll have to start over that area from scratch? Tough game to explain, but it's one that I hope, if you like simulation games, if you are more of a patient gamer, and if you don't mind needing to brute force some things, not everything goes together as seamlessly as you might hope, then this could be a good game for you. Finally, the last game on this list should not be a surprise to anybody. I had to have some type of game from this genre here, Stardew Valley. Now, Stardew Valley is the life sim, the garden sim type of game, farming sim, that I have spent the most time on. It was some number of years ago. I picked it up in the summer, and my game file on Steam, my playtime is 180 hours. So clearly, at some point, I got so hooked on the game. Yes, it covers all 4 seasons, spring, summer, fall, and winter, but the game starts you off in the spring, and much of the gameplay revolves around the spring-like mechanics. So whether you're planting your seeds, whether you're growing crops, that doesn't necessarily change whether it's spring, summer, or autumn. Only in the winter do you actually have distinct and different gameplay. Everybody has seen this game before. Everybody knows about this game. If you haven't played it by now, one thing that I can say about it is the focus is not only on the farming. In fact, the farming is only one component of it. I would say there are more or less 3 equal components to the game. Farming, sure, you could say it's a bigger chunk than the others, maybe 40% of the gameplay. 30% of the gameplay, if you want it to be, can be combat. Not right away, not when you first start your game, but in due time, you could spend a lot of your days doing combat, like I did. And then the remainder, the other 30%, is relationships. You do not have to pursue these fully. You do not have to level up everyone's relationship and friendship. But if you do, more things become unlocked, more events happen in the world, and you can have a lot of fun with those as well. So it's a game that you could play a bunch of different ways. It's not necessarily going to lock you into the farming simulation, although that is obviously the main part of the game. If you haven't played the game in a while, maybe now's the perfect time to get back to it, because the game is still receiving free updates. I haven't even played the multiplayer update, but that exists as well if you want to try the game out with somebody else. So that's it. That is a wrap on the video. 5 games. Hopefully you haven't seen all of them, so there are some new titles there for you. Hopefully you're also encouraged to go try some of these titles out for the first time. Like I said, you've got different gameplay genres here. You've got different game durations, short games, long games. There's got to be something in this list for you to try. If you've played them all, that's fantastic. If you want to leave any of your own titles in the comments section, go ahead. I'm going to have 5 brand new spring titles when we come around again in 1 year's time. But for now, enjoy that. Enjoy the new season. Thank you all for watching. Let me know what you're playing in the comments section, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye-bye.